This week on Business Brief, how economic pressures impacted firework vendors as they prepare for a special 4th of July, celebrating 250 years of American independence. Then, a financial planning expert explains how the new Trump accounts aim to jumpstart retirement saving for children. Welcome to the Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Sam Jackson, and I am joined by my co-host, Trevor Grandin. Trevor, how are you doing this week?
I am excited for the 4th of July, ready to celebrate the country's semi-quincentennial. Can you believe it's been 250 years?
Well, it'll be 250 more if we don't get into these headlines. Let's hop in.
Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe signed a more than $50 billion state budget into law this week and restricted nearly $500 million of spending in the process. Kehoe vetoed more than $52 million from the budget, but the bulk of the cuts were from spending restrictions that prevent agencies from using the money without the governor's approval. The $441 million in restrictions are still included within the budget, but require Kehoe to release the money when revenue becomes available. The governor's budget decisions come as Missouri faces uncertain state revenues, a rapidly declining general revenue balance, and shifting income from federal support programs.
There are 19.2 million people in the United States with Affordable Care Act health insurance plans this year, a 13% drop in enrollment from 2025. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services attributed this to a federal crackdown on fraudulent enrollment. But health analysts say the drop more likely comes from the January 1st expiration for federal subsidies, which caused an increase in plan costs that many people cannot afford. Experts say they expect enrollment to continue to decline as economic pressures persist.
U.S. employers were reluctant to add many jobs last month as hiring slowed compared to earlier in the year. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. economy added 57,000 jobs in June, a gain of less than half the previous month's total. The slowing labor market suggests businesses are still wary of the economy's health as inflation remains high and consumer sentiment falls to near post-pandemic levels. Despite nationwide excitement for the World Cup, restaurants, bars, and hotels saw 61,000 jobs cut in June. Hiring remains stronger than last year when employers added fewer than 10,000 jobs a month on average.
If the state fails to improve the accuracy of Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program payments, it will be required to cover 10% of federal nutrition assistance in 2027, which is about $150 million. Starting October 1st, 2027, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act will require states to fund between 5% and 15% of SNAP benefits if its payment error rates are greater than 6%. It would mark the first time in the program's history that federal funds would not cover 100% of benefits issued by the state. Missouri's error rate for the federal fiscal year in 2025 was 8.67%. The number of Missouri residents receiving SNAP benefits has decreased by more than 45,000 since October.
Missouri's public schools may soon be graded for their performance on an A through F scale alongside their students. This week, Governor Mike Kehoe received plans for the grading system from the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, along with a warning. The 24-page proposal estimated the system would cost more than $500,000 to create and would come with an annual price tag of more than $715,000. The governor signed an executive order in January directing the department to develop the plan. The extra costs come as the state auditor's office warns against further deficit spending, and Kehoe restricted more than $500 million from the 2026-2027 state budget.
Ameren Missouri, a utility company servicing 1.3 million Missourians in central and eastern portions of the state, may increase its rates next year by 10%. On average, that would be a $13 monthly increase in the average residential bill, and if approved, it would take place in mid-2027. The increase would net Ameren Missouri an additional $343 million, which the company says will pay for its investments to the power grid. Amron says customers who are struggling to pay their bills now have time to prepare for the increase or can utilize its new proposed assistance program.
So, the long awaited 250th anniversary of America's Independence Day is Saturday, and when there's 4th of July, there's usually fireworks involved in the celebrations. So, is business booming this year, or have economic pressures made it feel like a dud? I'm joined with reporter Brooke Riley. Brooke, I know you talked to several fireworks stores throughout Missouri. What did they have to say?
Yeah, so they all reported pretty similar experiences so far. Smaller retail stores and big firework wholesalers have seen excitement from customers about this year's festivities that they haven't heard in years past. Many sellers say people have been buying their pyrotechnics earlier this year, with some stores saying it's been busy since Memorial Day. Eddie Treadwell, co-owner of Little J's Fireworks, says the special nature of this July 4th is even bringing in new customers.
We're getting a whole new broad selection of customers that are coming in that have not normally bought fireworks in the past. We brought in a whole bunch of red, white, and blue themed items for the 4th of July this year to celebrate the 250th. And yes, we also offer online sales. And so our sales have really been skyrocketing because of that, being able to offer shipping and then pick up in store.
So does that mean both firework sellers and buyers are benefiting from this year's 4th of July celebrations?
So not exactly. Fireworks usually fall into the bucket of discretionary spending. And with continued price pressures and the rising cost of living, not everyone will be purchasing fireworks this year. Paul Bax, owner of Bax Fireworks, said these factors influenced how he ordered his supply of pyrotechnics this year.
Fireworks are, disposable income, and there's not a lot of that right now. So I'm being careful. Hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully it's a fantastic year. But that being said, you don't know.
So it sounds like spending patterns might be a bit varied among customers.
That's what many fireworks sellers are thinking too. But the American Pyrotechnics Association is projecting a blockbuster year with industry revenues climbing between $2.5 billion and $3 billion, according to Julie L. Heckman, executive director for APA. Last year, the total revenue from both consumer and display fireworks was $2.95 billion. From anecdotal accounts, sellers say people who can afford to do so have been spending a small percentage more than usual, and with some even saying, it's the 250th, why not? Bax said he's seen both takes firsthand in his shop.
They're ordering a lot more this year, the ones who can afford it. But I have heard a lot of customers telling me that they just don't have enough money, so they have to go a lot lighter this year.
So I know China has had some pretty hefty tariffs this past year before they evened out at about 25%. With almost all fireworks being imported from China, does this make them more expensive this year?
Absolutely. Most sellers I spoke with said they used a wait-and-see approach when timing the purchases of their pyrotechnics overseas. Treadwell says his shop was no exception.
A few containers got hit by tariffs, and at different rates. And then we also had a container come in that was in about a 1-week time frame where the tariffs were on hold. And so we had that container come in with 0 tariffs. And we are priced better than we were last year.
So I know a lot of the tariffs put in place last year were struck down in February by the U.S. Supreme Court. Are any of these sellers eligible for refunds?
Yes, many of them are, and some sellers I spoke with have already navigated the process of filing for refunds. None said they had received them yet, but many sellers are glad to recoup some of the extra costs they were forced to incur when ordering fireworks. Some said that they absorbed those costs rather than raising prices for customers.
So that sounds like it made profit margins even more slim for companies. I imagine wholesalers may have had just a little bit more flexibility in their budgets to withstand the extra costs, but how did smaller retailers make it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Many of the sellers I spoke with say that they are concerned about their livelihood as wholesalers begin to sell their goods to consumers rather than only other fireworks vendors. Bax says he's been witnessing this unfold in real time.
Now, some products don't go up that much, but a lot of them have, which means that all the fireworks companies have to charge with competition, bad economy, everything, we have to charge less. And that just takes pretty much all the meat off the bone, which is why you're seeing a lot of big buildings coming up and doing wholesale pricing to the public. So that's going to run a lot of tents and family businesses like us out of business eventually.
We just heard about the economics of fireworks this Independence Day, but what about using the holiday as an opportunity to invest?
Investing in what? Freedom?
Not quite. We're talking about Trump accounts, which are lifelong government investment accounts that open up this Saturday, July 4th.
Okay, what kind of investments do these accounts go towards?
In short, they're mostly for retirement. Reporter Noah Grabianski spoke with Andrew Zumwalt, the chair of the University of Missouri's Personal Finance Planning Program, about what these Trump accounts mean for Missourians and the broader economy. Here's part of that conversation.
Thank you so much for hopping on this call with me. So I guess we can just start from the beginning. Can you explain what they are and how did they first come about?
Yeah, and so it started with the One Big Beautiful Bill that came around in August, and that really was the founding of these Trump accounts. And so the bill was passed, the Treasury and the IRS started kind of laying the foundation. And really, for people, the first thing they could do is when they filed their tax returns, they could file a form 4547, and I'll give you a second to process that. You could file that form, and essentially you would open up these Trump accounts for your kids. And the contributions actually can start July 4th, 2026. Sometimes you hear people not refer to them as Trump accounts, but as Section 530A accounts. And it makes sense when you think of we have 529 accounts for our higher education and elementary and secondary ed. And so now we have these 530A accounts as well, kind of right next door, as a way to save money for youth. These Trump accounts are really the first time that we have a national program to save essentially for a children's retirement. Now, you can do other things with the money after the child turns 18, but ideally they're a way to kind of jumpstart saving for retirement for a young person, which makes a lot of sense because the young person, they have a lot of time. And so having the time for the compounding to happen in the account is extremely powerful. But the Trump account is really just a way to kind of jumpstart that retirement. And so it's the government has promised to fund those accounts up to $1,000 for children born between kind of 2025 and 2028. And so that's really useful. And a lot of other organizations or individuals have jumped in to fund these accounts as well. So I believe if your account is open by July 4th and you're born between 2016 and 2024, the Susan and Michael Dell will actually drop $250 in a child's Trump account, assuming that they live in a non-high income zip code. And that is a very high level. And so most zip codes in Missouri are actually going to qualify for that contribution to a Trump account.
And then looking at the economic side, what could this mean for Missouri's economics? What will people be investing in?
Yeah, the law is pretty clear. You have to has to be invested in certain kind of large U.S. based indices, and so it's not something where, again, it's not going to be exotic. And so you might see these indices include companies in Missouri. So some of the large companies that have large operations in Missouri, you actually might have an opportunity to kind of point to those with your child and say, hey, you own a piece of that. Then we talk about what that means to have ownership, to share in the, what does it mean to and kind of invest that capital and get a return on your capital. And so it starts those conversations. Not only is it useful on the financial side for growing wealth, it also, I think, helps people understand kind of where does that wealth come from? How do companies make money, and then what do they do with that money?
So it's helping these kids understand their financial investments early on, so that by the time they get older and they get more control over some of these accounts, or by the time they start looking forward to getting paid out, they will have better financial literacy.
You're absolutely right. More and more young people are joining companies where the retirement burden is on them. If we look back over the decades, the defined benefit plan, the traditional pension plan where the employer would provide for you, and that's disappearing rapidly, almost gone, except in some kind of government sectors. And so starting that retirement conversation a little bit early so that when they start their first job at 18 or 21 or whenever they enter the workforce and they're presented with that opportunity to contribute to that 401k or 403b or 457 plan, they'll have some knowledge. They'll be like, okay, yeah, I've been investing for my retirement for a while. This is nothing new. I can handle this. And so the Trump account is not something that is a must-have. It's just another tool in the toolbox to start saving and building wealth to spend sometime down the road.
Well, perfect. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
It is now time for us to get into the words of the week. Trevor, what's your word this week?
My word this week is egg.
That's an interesting one. What's going on with eggs in Missouri?
Well, egg prices have dropped over the last year, and that's spelling trouble for Missouri's egg producers. In May of last year, shoppers were paying $4.55 on average for a dozen grade A large eggs. In May of this year, prices had dropped to around $2.19.
Wow, that cuts almost half the amount in just a year. So why are egg prices dropping so drastically, and what does that mean for the producers?
Well, there are a couple factors, but the biggest one is bird flu. An outbreak identified in 2022 caused farmers to slaughter more than 166 million mostly egg-laying chickens. Fewer egg layers meant fewer eggs, and that led to higher egg prices. Now, there's an oversaturation in the commercial flock. Backyard flocks also tell part of the story. When prices were high, consumers started buying their own chickens and producing their own eggs, alleviating their reliance on the industry. Egg producers say they're losing a lot of money and say they're facing a less profitable year. But experts believe that consumers will soon see cheaper prices and a rebalance in the industry.
Wow, egg prices aren't anything to yoke about.
Okay, that's all I've got this week. What's your word, Sam?
My word is time.
Okay. 2 weeks ago, we had closing time. What time is it now?
Well, we're actually looking at how Americans spent their time last year. The annual American Time Use Survey showed that the amount of mostly or fully remote work among employed adults inched up to 35%, compared to 33% in 2024. This comes despite the efforts of many employers, like the federal government, to mandate a return to office. The survey showed that 70% of adults surveyed did some or all of their work in their workplace. Full-time employed people worked on average of 8.1 hours.
Okay, well, that accounts for activity during work hours, but how else did people spend their time?
So the next top way people spent their time was doing things around the house. On an average day, 81% of people engaged in household activities, which include housework, cooking, lawn care, or household management. On average, people spent about 2 hours on this, with women spending more on these activities than men.
Okay, this is starting to sound like all people do is work. What are people doing for fun?
Despite a large share of time being spent working in some form or another, 95% of people over the age of 15 spent at least some part of their day on leisure or sporting activities. Adults age 75 or over spent 7.4 hours on average doing so, from watching TV to socializing or exercising.
Okay, sounds like retired life is where it's at.
Yep, only 40 more years till we get there. For our closing thought, here's Andrew Zumwalt, chair of MU's Personal Finance Planning Program, speaking to the bipartisan support being expressed for developing lifelong investment plans for children.
They're called Trump accounts, but again, this idea has been long supported by folks in both parties, giving a head start to children to grow wealth, to build this idea of, hey, let's save for the future and invest in ourselves, invest in the economy, et cetera. And so the investment side of these accounts is actually pretty heavily regulated.
Well, that is all for this week. The M33 Project provided the music for this episode. For my co-host Trevor Grandin and editor Kelly DeRook, I'm Sam Jackson. This has been the Business Brief. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.